To my dear friends, family, and folks at home, hi, hello, and how are you? And welcome back to another episode of D-Talk, your safe space to expand your creativity, work on your critical thinking skills, and embrace your cringe. Today on the pod, we're going to talk about something that is probably close to everybody's hearts, and it's racism. No, it's not racism, but how am I going to say this? Today on the pod, we are going in and we are going to look at some older ideologies that I may have experienced in the last few days. Some boomer takes. No, we're actually going to connect it with some educational theory because I was presented with a lot of things that I thought, wow, why? You know, sometimes you're out in the wild and you hear things, you hear people say things, and sometimes it's even more shocking when people around are agreeing with that person and you think, wow, why is that? Why does that happen? Where did that come from? And why do you still think that? And then lo and behold, I was studying a few days later and I was reading some of these educational texts and I thought, oh, that's where that came from. So we're going to look at that today on the pod. And we're going to get right down to it. I've got my coffee here and I'm ready to go. On this beautiful sunny morning, let's get into it. Let's go. Burger finger. I'm currently waiting for a shipment of underwear in the mail right now, and I'm very excited and constantly looking at my notifications. But don't worry, I'll be present here with you on this day because I'm what? A professional. It's funny, I'm always a different person closing the tabs from the night before, and that's not what you think. Anyway, you know, sometimes you just fall down these rabbit holes of researching things that have no pertinence to your real life, but I'm here and it's midnight and I'm really invested. So here we go, babes. This is a response that I wrote for one of the classes that I'm in currently. And I just, you know, as I continue more in the world of art and participating in art and drag and music and makeup and dance and all of these things, sometimes I look back at one of my own pieces of writing and I think, wow, I'm a good writer. I didn't even realize that that's something I might be interested in. And, because I really feel like my personality comes off in the way that I write. And I think a big way that I achieve that is that I do voice to text and then I go back and edit everything. And it really sounds like it came from me. And I think when you're attempting to do any artistic endeavor, your goal should be to have people recognize your perspective in whatever you are creating, because that's good art. Right? Pretty much everything in the world has been done already. So if you can put your own spin on it that is uniquely you, then that's your USP. That's your unique selling point. It's a brisk holiday morning, and somebody inevitably brings up politics. How the holidays usually bring out these conversations of politics, I will never know. But the argument collectively shared by most everyone over the age of 60 in the room was that children no longer work the way they used to. And the other classic cliche hits such as, when I was a kid, I had to walk uphill both ways to school in 3 feet of snow, and our teachers hit us, all culminating in the achievement of coming out the other side in spite of all of these challenges. You see, dear listeners, I often find that people that argue this position wear their past and their trauma as a badge of honor and a reason to inflict those same experiences onto their children and subsequent generations. The argument that children today don't want to work in the same way that they used to, or that children are no longer motivated in the ways that they used to, is not specific to my experience. You see, these people that argue that children aren't motivated the way that they used to, children don't want to work as hard as they used to, that's not specific to my environment that I'm describing to you right now, but it is an indication of a greater school of thought that's growing within our society. The reality is that when these people were in a school system, it was a collection of disconnected facts and memorization used in order to do well in standardized testing. That's what that past sense of education was built for. You're teaching to the test, and you want all these people in the classroom to learn the same thing and not have any deviation. There's no creativity. There's no artistic endeavor. You're here to learn this series of disconnected facts in order to do well on the test so our school can get more funding. And, you know, it's all very serving capitalism is what it is, right? But if you're focusing on a series of disconnected tasks and little pieces of knowledge, you're not actually challenging these thinkers to a higher level of thinking. So these students were not challenged by higher levels of thinking because they were learning these fragmented chunks that were instilled within the context of testing. Right? So that's the first paragraph here of my article. And it just, you know, you've met these people, you've heard these responses of people who are like, the kids just don't want to work anymore. And all of the, like, it's just the conversations that I was around during this holiday time were really wearing on my soul because I cannot sit down because I find it incredibly hard to listen to people with racist takes not understand their privilege in the world, and kind of punching down is what that is. To hear people make such sweeping generalizations through those holiday time, like, of course, it's not specifically worse because it was around the holidays. It just was specifically worse because it was around the holidays, okay? To hear those sweeping generalizations, like kids don't want to work the way that they used to, and everybody's lazy and everybody just wants a check, and there's a big argument here too. There's a big argument here too about Indigenous folks, right? Because some people have this perception, right? And I think a big part of this perception is a lack of education. But there is this perception out there that I can't even say it in a full sentence, but by saying that all Indigenous people are lazy and that they're just out to get government checks, that argument makes me sick. And the people that say that are so grossly uneducated in the history of our province, in the history of our country, in the history of colonization in general. To have a group of people sit in a room who are all immigrants to this country explain why Indigenous people are not working as hard as they should is just a gross misrepresentation of what I want to be aligned with in my life. If you don't understand the history of our country, it might be easy to make those sweeping generalizations about a group of people, but then also including the vague arguments against safe consumption sites and drug use and people without homes, people who are living on the streets. And it illuminates an incredible amount of privilege that isn't obvious to the person that's talking. And I'm really interested in helping people discover their privilege and really understand how not only their skin color, but their gender identity and age precludes them from a world of discrimination that other people are facing. But this got me thinking really hard, right? And when I'm stressed out, I just sit and I think, and I had lots of time to do so. When I heard people talking about the idea that kids don't want to work anymore, it's an idea that we've heard before, right? People calling Gen Z lazy and they don't want to work, and you could get any job you want. You can go wash dishes, but they don't want to. And just all these super racist things. Like, it's all the immigrants that are coming and they do these jobs and this and that. And I'm thinking, you are an immigrant. You are an immigrant. You are an immigrant. Your family's been here for 2 generations, 3 generations, 5 generations. Indigenous people have been here for hundreds, thousands of generations. I don't know math. It just, how do you not recognize your own sense of privilege there when you, in fact, are an immigrant on this land? Oh, Canada, our home on native land. You don't understand where you are. You don't have that connection with the land around you to know what has happened on it before you even got here, to know the civilization and to know all of the work and structure that existed on this land before you got here as an immigrant, or before your parents or your grandparents arrived here on a boat in the 1950s. You think that's when history started on this land, is when your ancestors arrived here on the boat? That's when you think history started here? No. Crack a book. God, I don't have the 21 things you should know about the Indian Act up here behind me, but I have in past videos, and it just... So, okay, this overall conversation really got me thinking about the perspective that Gen Z is lazy and that they don't want to work anymore, right? So I thought, where is this coming from? Because I do see pieces of this myself throughout my own educative practices, but then also within myself. I'm not interested in working as hard as past generations. I'm just not. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to lay that out right here, because I think a part of this is that because past generations have gone through trauma, they only feel that that trauma is justified if they can inflict that upon future generations. And if these future generations walk up and get their toes to the edge of the trauma and go, actually, I'm not interested in doing this, that's upsetting to the people who did experience this and are subconsciously expecting future generations to go through the hard things that they went to, almost through this idea of like the passage of time and the rites of existence. You have to go through these hard things that I went through because I am just the best person, essentially, is what that's serving. How this relates to education here is the prescription of all of the things that teachers do in their classrooms. In some different schools, teachers are prescribed how to decorate their classrooms, how to structure their lessons, and how to comment on students' work, and in some cases, even script their lesson plans, word for word. You have to make everything so specific because under this idea of scientific efficiency, you can't have a deviation from a standard norm. Everybody needs to be doing the exact same thing at the same time to meet the same goals, right? And it's kind of that same idea, right? There's no deviation. Everybody needs to do the same thing in order to have a functioning society. And this is under that educational guise of scientific efficiency, right? Here are the facts. You need to learn the facts so you can regurgitate them for the test, and then everybody's good to go. The problem here is that you do make teachers a bit alienated. And when it comes down to scripting all of these lessons, there are so many hours wasted by teachers putting their words into a document that are never read by anybody ever again in the name of scientific efficiency. It's so inefficient. These teachers spend their time writing down what they had worked so hard to develop in their minds as part of their skill set and intuition as teachers. And this kind of scripted curriculum makes teachers alienated, and they're kind of seen as executors of somebody else's plan. This idea of scientific efficiency, it does disconnect teachers from communities, and then it makes it impossible for these teachers to have meaningful impacts in those communities when they are some of the best professionals positioned to do so. So I really see a big connection here with scientific efficiency in the way that some of these older people outline that children don't want to work anymore because they're not willing to accept the fact that a new world order is in fact building, and that these children do not have to go through the same traumas that you went through as a child. And they're actually adamantly avoiding a lot of those things that would develop such ideas as racism, classism, homophobia, all of that, right? So there is this level of frustration that our kids aren't following in our footsteps. And sometimes, thank God for that. Now, because of this, you're starting to take the skills away from the teachers, right? The essentials of working with children, like emotional literacy and a genuine interest in children's uniqueness, it becomes extraneous in this teaching context, right? So building a system that models workers on a production line, right? I want you to picture a factory, right? Everybody's at different stages doing the exact same thing in the pursuit of one static goal that everybody is sharing. It's bland, it's gray, it's sad, it's lackluster, and it's identical. So building these students in order to live a life of efficiency as productive members of society with these prescribed roles that were assigned to them with no insight into their individual interests is again this idea of scientific efficiency. And it's absolutely the perspective that I saw over this holiday break. Because the goal of this, right, is to build each individual person into a first-class citizen that will participate in the machine of capitalism. They're trying to build consumers because our world right now is built on consumerism. So you really have to start to look at children in our world as things apart from their human qualities. Building education systems as systems of commerce and production that require output and competition, right? This idea of output and competition, productivity. You need to be out there learning these things, getting these jobs, making that money, doing all of these great things in order to be seen as successful through some people's eyes. It's very harmful. It's very harmful. And a lot of these Gen Zers are not interested in it. And it's kind of slowly seeping upward through the generations as well, because I'm just barely a Gen Z. I'm a Gen Z millennial, or I'm a millennial baby. I don't know where it is, but I'm right in the middle there on the cusp, just like the Virgo Libra cusp. You know, I used to be a Virgo, but not anymore. I don't want to talk about it. So as you can tell, there's kind of two competing ideas of thought here, right, that we're looking at. It's this idea that everything needs to be the same and nobody can be creative, and we're kind of building this idea of the first-class man. And then there's this other competing idea over on this side of that. We need to develop each student into a member of society that is aware of themselves, participates in self-actualization, has inner motivation and confidence, and pursues their own unique goals. Right? But why do you think that kid that is pursuing their own unique goals might be threatening to capitalism? Well, they might not develop into the type of consumer that you are looking for in order to keep your machine running under the guise of capitalism. This over-consumerism that we see all over the world and online, right? These people that have collections. What's coming to mind right now is the Stanley Cup collections. You know, a Stanley Cup, right? Just basically a water bottle, but oh my gosh, she must be like 60 ounces. She stands about that high on the table. She's big. She's an it accessory that is kind of swept through the time. Or maybe if you're a little bit older, it could be those Starbucks cups. You know, I have friends that do that consumerism shit where they have a wall of those Starbucks cups. If you're listening, you know exactly who you are. But hey, no. I can't even roast you because I have lived a life of consumerism up to this point as well. I think my first one was DVDs. Oh, hundreds, if not thousands of DVDs that I bought and purchased and let them get so dusty they look like they'd belong in an art exhibit, right? And it just, I don't even own a DVD player anymore, but I still have 100 DVDs sitting in my shelf out there. For what? Poor K. There's no reason other than it felt good to consume. I've had all sorts of collections. My tea wall, oh my God. So yeah, I'm David and I worked in David's tea. That joke never gets old for me either. But I have so much tea. I've had so much tea. I've spent thousands on tea. I am drinking it all. I am drinking it all. But I've participated in all these collections as well. I can't think of anything else. But I know I've been through phases of collecting and purchasing a lot of other things under the guise of capitalism. But that's this idea of that's this idea of like consumerism, making everybody interested in the same thing and be involved in that performative overconsumption to influence other people to do that same thing. And I was caught right up in that world. Oh, I was caught right up in that world. So with these two competing ideas, right, you have your over consumeristic, low motivation, low self-image person who punches down in the world, and the person who is focusing on themselves and what they're truly interested in. But then the question becomes, how do you educate this person and this person together? Or how do those educational ideologies really shake out in a classroom when there's one leader? Something really important here that we need to talk about is this idea of the hidden curriculum. So if you're not a teacher, what the hidden curriculum means is that the teaching that exists outside of the preparation of the high stakes testing. It's not math, reading, and writing. It's how do we get this person to interact with their world in such a meaningful way that they can not only provide value, but garner value from? How can you get each individual in this room to interact with each other in such a meaningful way that they can create relationships and build community that they feel comfortable in and have this positive learning environment in? Because if you don't have positive classroom culture in your room when you're trying to sit down and teach exponents, they're not going to be listening to you because they're going to be worrying about all this other extraneous stuff that's up in the air that you haven't dealt with as the leader, right? So this idea of the hidden curriculum really comes out in the way that you as the teacher model your behavior for your students. And this is absolutely a big part of parenting, or rather should be a big part of parenting, because your kids are always watching. And the way that you behave in all moments of your life are being soaked up by their little sponge brains, and they're going to act in almost the exact same way pretty much every time. So this idea of the hidden curriculum, I believe, is very important when you're working in classrooms, because it's actually you're just straight up teaching those children how to be good people in the world, right? And there is no time for there truly is no time for hidden curriculum. And working in this sense of hidden curriculum, because it exists outside of the preparation for high stakes testing, it usually requires some sort of deception on the part of the teacher, right? And it's so like, it does feel like you're lying. It does feel like you're lying and spending time on things that are extraneous because they're not written down in the curriculum. But in order to have a functioning classroom where students can actually learn, you have to focus on this hidden curriculum. Again, these are these two competing ideas here of self-actualization and over-consumerism, right? We're building the lore, okay? Keep up. Oh, this is good. Okay, so before we continue here, we're going to take a little tiny break. I'm going to go do a loop around my apartment and get myself unheated so we can continue our conversation between these two competing ideas of self-actualization and overconsumption. Wow, we're getting deep here on the pod. We'll be right back. Burger finger. That's right, America. The Wigstress is back, and I'm ready to finish off this conversation with you. Now, there's one more piece of context that I think is really important here when we're talking about this idea of children don't want to work anymore. And a big part of that comes from people in the middle class and people across classes, but probably mostly densely populated in the middle class. I gotta do some tongue rolls, the enunciation here. Burger finger. A lot of people spend their time preparing for standardized testing because they believe it will provide them upward mobility in their classes, even though these standardized tests do not prepare students for rigorous life that is demanded by a globalized economy. Like the idea of provincial achievement tests, right? If I look back to grade 12, my English provincial achievement test, I think I got 51 on. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure I failed my provincial achievement test and my average was like 60 and then it averaged to 51. My final grade in ELA 30-1 was 50%. Did that inform my writing ability? Did that inform my interest in writing? No. Did it help or hurt me in my life for pursuing an education? No. Did I ever think about it again after reading it on that whatever stuffy Monday morning and going, ooh, I did bad? No, didn't think about it after that. So, this idea that you need to participate in things that actually won't get you where you want, but on paper, they'll look good, right? I can kind of feel that with my undergrad degree, not so much with the drama, but with the education piece for sure. I didn't learn as much in my undergraduate degree of education as I thought I would. It wasn't as meaningful for me as I thought it would be. I can't say the same for the master's program. I am being challenged and I am learning an incredible amount that wasn't even touched in my undergrad degree, right? So sometimes you have to participate in things that you aren't interested in doing in order to reap the benefits of them later. But I think Gen Z and a lot of these younger people aren't interested in participating in these performative acts in order to get somewhere in their life. It's just not meaningful to them. And can you blame them? Of course, they're not interested in doing things that aren't going to help them in the long run just to look good on paper. Ugh, it's exhausting. Why would these young people in this context be motivated to work towards achievement they don't think will help them reach their goals? Young people have been gaslit into the idea that if they put their heads down and work hard, they can achieve success in the world, when that straight up is no longer the case. The contradiction between academic success and personal success causes a lot of cognitive dissonance that then works its way as anxiety into these students. This builds a sense of distrust between young people and policymakers, which we can see out in the world, which can sometimes include teachers. Even though under this idea of scientific efficiency, teachers are not policymakers, but teachers can represent policymakers, which is almost the same thing in the minds of many people across our world. I think this idea that some people think young people are lazy and not willing to work anymore is a direct response to a growing ideology that uniqueness needs to be cherished. There is this growing school of individualism and self-actualization is more important for your students than doing things just to do things. Because what is the goal of education? Is it educational success or is it personal fulfillment? It's really hard for it to be both. But if we go back, okay, in the beginning of me brainstorming about this, I thought, where did this idea come from? That some people just think that, oh, all these young people are so lazy. Where did that come from? Where does that stem from? Why is that a part of your thinking? And it comes right down to this right here, because there was an educational philosopher by the last name of Taylor. And under this idea of scientific efficiency, what developed the education system 100 years ago, 50 years ago, I'm not really sure. Under this idea of scientific efficiency, you are not asking for the initiative of your students. All you want them to do is obey the orders that they are given, do what they say, and do it quickly. So in this education system where these students are growing up, they're not asked for initiative. They're not asked for their personality. They're not asked to bring anything to the table that's unique. They are asked to fulfill the orders and do it quickly. One of the sentences I read in the textbook is, what does this man want me to do? Awful, right? So if you're not asking for the initiative of your students when they're in school, how can you be asking for their initiative when they're out in the world? If schooling does not reflect the world, how are these kids going to move out of school and be productive in the world? They're not interested in working in that world because they're not familiar with it. It's not interesting. It's not built off of this idea of self-actualization. It's built off of this idea of consumerism. And a lot of young people aren't interested in that anymore. Because from the capitalistic perspective, right, individualism and self-actualization are a threat to their financial growth. This idea of capitalism and Eurocentrism and scientific efficiency are only preparing students to be a functioning member of capitalism with a cookie cutter in one hand and a ruler in the other, girl, because creating loyal workers to participate in the consumerism machine is not the same as having each individual reach their own unique potential. So I really believe that when people argue that children are lazy and don't want to work, they are reflecting back their own experience and how negative it was for them. And the only way that they can rationalize their formative years being that uncomfortable is to impose that upon future generations. Is an educated person somebody who is academically educated and that can participate in the capitalistic machine with the highest rate of efficiency? Or is an educated person somebody who makes the world a better place through their ability to connect with others and build communities and affect positive change? Well, one of them makes money and one of them doesn't. If you're not, I've experienced this as a teacher so much, and I've experienced this with children in my life, not in an educative sense, just children that exist within my experience, is that a lot of people aren't asking their students to think. A lot of people aren't requiring their children to engage in critical thought in the world. And that really bothers me because that plays right into this capitalistic or self-actualization argument here too. You have to be able to have your students or your children engage in critical thinking so they can navigate the world in a meaningful way. Right? One of the ways that always illuminated this to me in such a crystal clear way is like you can have students in a classroom who can function beautifully, right? Their executive functioning skills are top notch. Like they just know how to do things and the routine flows and this and that, right? But then you take that same student on a field trip and they lose it. They don't know what to do because everything's new and fresh. And then they're being wild and crazy. And it just, I was one of those students because I was really good at routine. I was so built into this idea of not asking questions and just doing what I needed to do. What does this man want me to do? I was really great at answering that question, and I was already done asking for the next task, right? I was pumping out these things at a capitalistic rate that everybody was super impressed with me in my educational experience for the most part. Grade 7. Hi. Anyway, I don't think she's teaching anymore. I've had a few rough years, but anyway, yeah, I was one of those kids that really struggled if I went outside anywhere because then it was a free for all and I didn't know what to do because I was only being taught time and location specific skills and I wasn't developing this overall idea of critical thought and how to engage in a variety of situations across time. And a lot of kids aren't being taught that in schools right now. And even if they are being taught that in schools right now, if they go home and that's not fostered by parents, then it's kind of a losing battle because parents, usually rightfully so, have more of an influence than teachers do. Because essentially, folks, at the end of the day, if you're only teaching to the test and if you're only reducing each individual student in a classroom or in a society to a standard score, you are decontextualizing that student into just a number, and you're not really looking at the idiosyncrasies and the little moments within each context that really mean the most when it comes to a positive educative experience. You can't compare a rural classroom in southern Alberta to that of an urban classroom in Ontario. And you know what? It's not even that broad. You can't really compare the students of an urban classroom in Alberta to a rural classroom in Alberta. They're just not the same. And even from one community to the next, everything is so context specific that if you're reducing these students down to a standard score, you're kind of losing all of the human qualities about them and just reducing them to a number, which fits with this capitalistic idea that everybody needs to be the same. That is not fostering self-actualization or individualism at all. So a lot of the ways that our current system is built is to produce more worker bees and consumerists for this capitalism machine. But in order to have a meaningful educative experience, everything does need to be differentiated. It needs to be differentiated in the civic, health, recreation, language, parental, religious, social. All of those things need to be at the forefront of schooling because your education needs to be as wide as life itself. The curriculum needs to be contextualized within every province, city, community, classroom, individual, and this idea of scientific efficiency does not account for that. And that's what's creating this disconnect. So, okay, to conclude this conversation here, girlies, of course, today's children are not interested in this archaic sense of efficiency when knowing is obsolete. You know that argument? Okay, I'm going to take you back. Ooh, this might age me a little bit, but you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm young. I'm 27, okay? Georgia just said I'm for the 6 feet underground, and my God, that was funny. No. Of course, these students are not interested in working in this structure that they can look up through the generations and go, oh, y'all are not happy? Well, then let's not do what you did. But then the older generations get upset and they think, you're not doing what I did. It's because you hate me. Oh, so you want me dead? It's that immediate sense of betrayal that we sometimes feel from these older generations. Everything is very black and white. It's extreme thinking, always swinging from one extreme to the other. This is this older idea of the capitalistic ideas that a lot of these older generations still cling on to with their dear dusty life. Right? Like every dusty bag of elbows out there has some reason why they think kids today are lazy, and it's because they want to push their experiences onto those children because if I had to deal with it, so would you. But can you blame these students for not wanting to work under these conditions? Like, why would you want to spend your time knowing pointless facts when knowing things is basically pointless, right? Knowing the facts is pointless in the sense that you have to know what to do with those facts after you learn that information. Anybody with a phone in their pocket can Google any piece of information in the world that you want, but what you do with that information is what informs everything after, right? It doesn't matter if you know something, but do you know what to do with that something that really makes a difference in an educative and in a whole life perspective setting, right? I remember, let me take you back to like 2010, right? And these middle school math teachers are barking at you because you're not going to have a calculator on your person. You need to know 5 times 5. Well, 5 times 5 is 25. I do know that. Mental math has served me a little bit over the years. But 6 times 7, girl, I could 42. Okay, is that right? I don't know. I don't care. Because, bestie, right now, even in this room, there's 3 calculators. I, at any point in my life, have 2 calculators on my person, and I have 5 if my backpack is on. So what? Oh no, even more, because I could call out to the Alexa, who's not listening to me right now because she hates me and she wants me dead. Echo, what is 6 times 7?
6 times 7 is 42.
Girlies, we live in a different world, and as long as we drag our students through this outdated sense of cognitive dissonance, we will see the negative effects on our communities for generations to come. So I'm so excited for Gen Z. I'm so excited for these group of individuals to start hitting our society and seeing how they're changing it, because they already are. They already are. There are so many metrics upon which Gen Z is changing things from the generations that came before them. And they're moving away from this sense of performative overconsumption and closer to this idea of self-actualization, because, spoiler alert, only one of them gets you fulfilled. And it's not the consumerism. And Gen Z is interested in feeling fulfilled and feeling happy. And that's something that's not usually at the forefront of the minds of these older generations that think children are lazy. Right? Burger finger. So, besties, that's the end of our educative conversation here. I do have one more thing that I'd like to share with you, because it is quite a wild story from my New Year's Eve experience. So I'm going to take one final break. I'll be back in just a few moments, and we'll get into some chaos, confusion, and madness here on this episode of D-Talk, here with me, our host, David Bay. We'll be right back. Burger finger. Okay, dolls, we're back here for the last piece of this episode of D-Talk. Now, we've got really educated, we've got really deep, we've talked about all of these deep, societal, resounding things, and now I'd like to take some time to just be some quirky girls and talk about whatever the hell. And so I have a little bit of a story, so we're gonna close that, because I'm just gonna wipe away all of my smarts and I'm just gonna vibe. We're just gonna be here and do that. So, okay, picture it. It was New Year's Eve 2023, which was only a handful of weeks ago. And I went out to a bar, and we're gonna say the bar because I wanna start an open dialogue with this bar, the Owl in Lethbridge. So it's a nice venue. It's big. I've been to many drag shows there. They do all kinds of things. It's a nice venue. I think I don't know very much about it, but because I was in Lethbridge, I decided to go to the Owl with a friend, and it was some band that was playing and whatever, and we were gonna be there for the ball drop. And we were going to be there for the countdown, right? That was our goal. We just wanted to be around people and around music and just have this nice, little like partyish send off into the new year, right? So we get in. And of course, this wasn't a drag show, so the people that were there weren't super gay looking. Like some of them looked really queer, but it wasn't predominantly a queer event. So we go in and we're doing a loop around the room because I'm looking to see if there's anybody there that I recognize that maybe we could sit with. And I did spot somebody right at the corner, and I thought, oh, I know her, not super well, but we used to work kind of together in the same location. And I thought, great, let's go sit with them. So we went over, sat down. The person that I went with was talking to some girl. I was talking to some girl. We're both having a great time. We're talking. And then I decide to go outside with the girl that I was talking with because we were getting deep, And as soon as a couple of drinks happened for me, I like to get existential and talk about all of the deep things in the world. And this girl did too. And we said, it's too loud in here. Let's go be existential outside. So we did. We went outside and, we did a little bit of trauma dumping, and we're hugging and crying. And it's just such a cute moment, like it's just those girls in the bathroom that are like, I love you so much. And I just met you. You're the best person in the world. It was very that. So after our conversation outside, me and this girl come back in, and she's about to sit down on the chair that we were both sitting on before we left. And right before I looked down, and there was a lot of ice on the chair, and the chair looked wet. And I grabbed her and I was like, no, girl, don't sit there. Like something happened here. And we reacted, and we're like, I wonder what happened there. Anyway, so I look over in this direction and I start talking with the friend that I went to this bar with, and we're like kikiing and whatever. And then I look over and I notice that there's a man that's sitting in that chair. And I thought, that's weird. He's sitting on all that ice right now, and he's just on his phone and not reacting to a cold butt at all. What in the world's going on here? And to scroll back here for a little bit of context, when I arrived here in that space, that man was being There's no other word to describe it but flirty with me. He just kept like looking at me with these like lovey eyes. And he's like, I love your makeup. You look so good. I love your makeup. And he just kept saying that to me. I didn't have my brows blocked, but I had like my normal like drag eye on with all of the stones and that. It was orange and blue. I did look sickening. But anyway, this guy was being like super overtly nice to me and it was making me uncomfortable. But anyway, so I'm talking to this friend that I went there with, and then this guy is sitting on the ice, right? That's where we are in the story. Keep up. And then I look over at this man, and okay. Then I look over to this man as I notice him, and it's me and my friend sitting together on the same chair. So we're both in the same eye line of this man that's sitting there. And he looks at us and does one of these. It's terrifying. And I thought, what a stark contrast from how you've been flirting with me all evening, and now you're like doing the little like whatever. Oh yeah, I guess if you're a listener, it's just that intense like grade 7 boy like freak out look jerk neck kind of thing, like with big intense eyes, and it's kind of like a threatening like gotcha kind of situation, right? And I thought, what in the world is going on here? You loved me and now you're like trying to intimidate me. And I look over at my friend and he goes, yeah, can I talk to you for a second? And I'm like, what? Yes, you can. And he goes, feel my chest. And I reached out and touched his shirt and he was soaking wet. And then my mind starts putting all these things together. I'm like, oh, the drink that was sitting there, he's wet. What the hell is going on here? So my friend takes me outside and he's like, yeah, I don't know where this guy just threw his whole water at me. And he just keeps saying that I need to leave. And he was just being really rude to my friend. And I thought, what? Not only, okay, so let's rewind it back even further. This man that threw the drink was the boyfriend of the girl that I knew that I sat down with. And I thought, what in the world? So you either watched your boyfriend throw this drink at a random man and said nothing, or you didn't see it. And this is just the typical behavior of your boyfriend. I was stunned. I was shocked. I was like, how did all of these people around here just accept that that was acceptable behavior from this man? And he faced absolutely no consequences whatsoever. It was mind-blowing to me because if somebody threw their water at me in a bar like that, I immediately would have went to security. I would not have engaged with that person at all. And I would have waltzed myself directly to security and said, that man just threw his water at me. Get him out of here. Anyway, so then in talking with my friend, I said, like, I don't really care if we're here at the drop of midnight with these people. Like, I don't really know them. It doesn't matter to me. We're at Lethbridge, girl. It's not that serious. And he agreed, so we went back in, grabbed our stuff, and left. And I did go up to this man before I left, and I said, why did you throw your drink at him? And he goes, what? I'm like, why did you throw your drink at him? And he again goes, what? I'm like, why did you throw your drink at him? And he looked up at me and goes, fuck if I know. And in that moment, I was stunned. I thought, oh, so you're just doing whatever. That's really weird. Like, he just didn't have an explanation for me. And I said, you're disgusting. And he looked up at me and said, but I like you, though. Yeah, that's not a good sign there that I called him disgusting. And he looked up and enjoyed that. That does point to some other problems there as well. And then apparently after we left, he did get kicked out for being rowdy and that. So supposedly there was security around. But it just blows my mind, the behavior of some people out in the wild. Like, how do you think you can do something like that and just get away with it? I guess because he did. Anyway, this is all to say that the owl, I left your bar without paying for my double gin and tonic that I consumed. So if you want to send me your email, I will happily transfer you the $13 that I still owe you because I had to leave real fast. First time in my entire life that I've left a bar without paying for a drink, but it wasn't even on my mind. It was not even on my mind. And I did order a second drink right before we left. Well, I didn't know it was right before we were leaving. So yeah, the owl, I owe you money. Yeah, sorry about that. We got to make that right. And maybe I'll give you that guy's name so you don't let him back in your bar after so it doesn't cause any problems. But yeah, crazy. Anyway, so yeah, that's just my random story. So the holidays were taxing. They were. But you know what? Sometimes you need to go back into worlds that you used to live in only to see the difference of the world that you have created now. Sometimes it's really hard as you're climbing a mountain of achievement. You don't really recognize your perspective until you dip down a little bit. So bestie, if you're at a spot right now and you're struggling to conceptualize your growth over the last little bit, take a moment, find a peak, turn around and look back at where you've come from. And sometimes an easy way to look back is to go back physically in the spaces that you used to exist in, because all of a sudden some of these older things will start to come back to you and you'll think, wow, I used to think like that. I used to act like that. I used to behave like that. And I don't anymore. And thank God for that. So, girlies, continue on your self growth journey. Even if you cannot see or feel the differences right now, even 1% a day does ultimately result in exponential growth. So you can do it. I have faith in you. Don't throw your drinks at people. Make sure to tell old bigots that they are, in fact, racist and that has no place in your life. But of course, do not martyr yourself to the point of educating every racist on the street, because you do know you can't Mother Teresa yourself into doing that. And we don't want what? Martyrship, because that is a boomer thing. So, besties, thank you so much for watching this episode of D-Talk with David They. I'm your host, David They. I hope you enjoyed this little educative conversation mixed with some old school nonsense and terrible racist behavior. So make sure to be kind to yourself, drink your water, mind your business, and until next time, I will see you here on YouTube next week or Spotify. I don't know where you're listening, girl. I'm kind of losing it now. I do like sliding, and this mic moves too with it as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next week, goodbye.